Good morning, Mathieu Rabéchaud from AFP. We have delivered fewer Falcons because of the supply chain challenges, as you said. Are you fearing that these difficulties will have an impact, the ramping up of the Rafale? Yes, there is a risk. As I said, we try to deal with problems and challenges one by one, but we are up to our standards. We've delivered 32 instead of 35, so we're almost online. But it's really a daily hard work when you are on the eve of the delivery of some equipment and the supplier says, well, they won't be able to deliver everything we've ordered. You have little time to respond. So we have to get prepared, and we have teams in our industrial operations divisions and procurement and supply teams, so that we rely on the suppliers who are in better health, or sometimes we shift the production mode in order to, to deliver. And there are risks on both, that is on Rafales and Falcons. But the strength of our company is that you have to be very agile. Sometimes I have to shout out loud. And during the pandemic, we've delivered all our aircrafts on time. Everything was delivered on time. And it was quite appraised by some of our clients, like India, for instance, which means that our staff, our employees were working in difficult conditions with all the precautionary measures that had been introduced, and that's the strength of our company and of our subcontractors. We are also working with more than 500 subcontractors, and even when some of them are going through difficulties, we try and manage to find solutions. And we need to find a solution to each and every problem. You know, if a screw is missing, you cannot deliver the aircraft. That's the problem. Thank you. From Presse Agence Côte d'Azur, you've answered many of my questions. I have 2 to 3 questions. You've talked about MCO earlier and the improvement of operations. Now, in terms of outlooks, what about MCO in the future, the MCO contracts? I have further questions. You've talked about the Aero India Bangalore trade show and said that the outfall was very possible. And what about the Phoenix work? And when are you going to inaugurate this site? And then 2 other questions about some breakthrough you have mentioned. You have had some problems, shortages in hiring resources. Human resources are a raw material. I'm thinking about titanium, for instance, and same for the skills. We've experienced something terrible in France where there is a corrosion of the cooling systems of the nuclear power plant, and we no longer have qualified and skilled welding operators. We are not EDF, and we still have welders and welding operators at Dassault. We we have difficulties for all our business line. We try and make sure that supplies are there now. In addition to the geopolitical context, we're in a context where many are retiring. So we have to make sure that the skills from the best of engineers in our engineering study, development, or welders can transfer their knowledge and their expertise and improve it, because the young generations will improve these skills thanks to new technologies. But the basic skills have to be transferred. So that's a difficulty of a small business, because Dassault is a small business, but that's also our strength. We are very agile and constantly not every day, but we're working hard on this, and that's something we're working on. We try to maintain and keep the skills. Welders and our boiler makers are also very happy because these are considered as the highest in the pyramid of the employees in the aeronautic industry. So we hire them and then we train them. And this is traditionally done at Dassault Aviation in the form of a shadow training. That is, a senior operator will teach and train a junior in the work, on the spot, in the shop floor. And we have many young coming up, and we have difficulties in recruiting. And on top of that, the backlog is full, and we also want to recruit women. So difficulties are adding up for the HR department, and they're working on this with all our managers. So that was for the last question. Titanium, well, indeed, for some time we were dependent on titanium from Russia. Penalties and sanctions are enforced. It seems normal that we do not titanium for jet fighters. So we have relied on alternative suppliers with whom we already worked before. So they have to supply us with more quantities, and we are trying to develop new sourcing solutions for titanium, for electronics components. There are some components in our flight computation systems, in all the components that are delivered for the Rafale. So far, so good, but it's also been complicated. And when we find suppliers, sometimes we have much higher prices, like steel, for instance, and all this was taken into account. It has kept us quite busy in 2022, and I'm sure it's going to be keeping us busy again in 2023, plus the higher prices of energy, and this has an impact on SMEs. As for the first question, provided I can read my handwriting, MCO contracts, well, the MCO, as I said, is about supplying a service to the users. So the verticalization of the contract is such that as the aircraft manufacturer, we take care of everything. The engine is a bit separate, so we deliver to our client an availability based on scenarios. And when we commit over 10 years, it helps to better adjust the supplies, the spare parts, to work with the suppliers for the standardized and required inspections, avoiding some peaks in the activities, because I remember that all the orders were coming at the same time. The military were not happy, neither were we. Now we can roll out our schedules and planning. And for the Rafales, it works so well that it was extended to the Atlantic 2, which is quite a feat because there are only two currently in operations. All the original suppliers have given up on their maintenance commitments, and we're taking them up. And it's difficult to maintain it in operations, but we're doing it because it is our duty towards our customers and the French Navy. Same thing for Mirage 2000, because unlike the Rafale, you only have one, let's say, one standard, more or less. For Mirage 2000, you have several differences in models, so the fleet is more difficult to manage. With the Rafale, you have a standardized system that's easier for us for the export contract and maintenance contract and MCO contract in France. It will help us to better organize our logistic flows and the human resources allocated to the MCO contracts.
Sergi, excusez-moi, je n'ai pas dit. Sergi, the delivery will be at the end of the year. Saying it with a lot of caution because in the building it was even more complicated than the manufacturing of Rafale. There was a lot of delay, people saying, we're not going to do your roof anymore because energy costs so much. So they stopped right in the middle and we had to manage all that. But it is progressing. It's Anuradha Shapar, Times Aerospace. I have a question on business jets. During the crisis, that is the segment that really withstood things compared to commercial aviation. What about the evolution of this market, and what are the perspectives for Falcons, especially the new generation of Falcons? And you talked about the ramping up. Thank you. Thank you. So a lot of good things for the new Falcons, the 6X, and in a few years from now, the 10X. This is what is expected from the market. The market is very dynamic. Why is it dynamic? Well, unlike the image, it is dynamic because the world and the countries need, and the companies need to develop, make sure that industry is advancing, the trade is advancing. And the best way to do trade for some large companies that are companies everywhere, that have suppliers around the world, that have customers around the world, is to fly. And instead of using business jets, because you go from one point to another, that is not only do you fly to a place, but you can follow a whole route with your aircraft and change the appointment times because it's not always the exact time. Then you can go to the United States. You can visit 4 or 5 sites in the United States, and you don't have to use the domestic flights with all the constraints that can pose with large airports, flights that are canceled, etc. So for business aviation, I see a very strong development, and business development will decarbonize before the commercial flights. Because somebody who uses a business jet will pay more for the fuel, which will be synthetic alternative fuel in the future. It's more difficult for the commercial flights unless they increase the ticket price. Well, business jets will be decarbonized before the large airlines will do so. So I see a very strong development, and the market, it's mainly made up of the United States and Europe, and Asia is coming up without China. What about the Middle East? The Middle East has always been a very small share. It is there. We sell and deliver aircraft to the Middle East, and a few 6X, which is an interesting range for the Middle East. They can go to the United States, to Asia, and I hope that the 6X will really develop and will help us progress in the Middle East, amongst other countries, not only the Middle East. Veronica Yarmar for the Figaro. You've just mentioned the topic. I had a question on China. We saw the sudden end of the zero COVID policy. So therefore, will this make it an attractive market for the Falcon, or not at all because it is too early still? A question regarding Russia. Can you tell us how many aircraft were canceled in your backlog? And a question regarding HR and all the social aspects. I read on one of the slides 1,500 hires. Was that in 2022, or was this the forecast for 2023? So can you specify what is your action plan in terms of hirings in 2023? And finally, can you tell us how the NAOs went, the pay negotiations went, and can you tell us the outcome of all that? Thank you, Veronica. For Russia, I'll answer immediately. We're not going to give you the figure of the aircraft canceled, but it's roughly 10 to 15% of the backlog. So you have an order of magnitude. It was quite significant for us, and it was significant for our stations. The Russians would overhaul their aircraft in Europe, and all our overall stations in Europe, all our competitors also experienced a real drop. That's for Russia. Now for China, I will answer with a joke. It's the largest market in the world. That's where we sell the least number of aircraft. And it's as usual. It's a huge potential. We really believe in it, but we don't sell because of the COVID. We don't sell because we say that there are some political issues. We don't sell because they'd rather make the aircraft themselves rather than buying. They want to have a price for 100 instead of the price for just one. And the sales people will scream at me, will scold me, but it's not thanks to China that we are surviving. In the future, we do not know, as my friends from the Middle East say, Bukra, inshallah. But we are not forecasting anything for China, but the 10X would be totally adapted to China, as it will be adapted for the western coast of the United States and for France, for those who want to fly, for example, to Asia. As for the hirings, yes, we have hired 1,500 people in 2022, which is huge because we have to integrate them, etc. We will hire roughly 2,000 in 2023. That's our objective. And you will see, because you see the workforce, some people have gone on retirement, so we're really renewing our workforce right now. And since we are developing, the equations are not so simple. We're giving work to our subcontractors too. It was harder during the COVID years, and now we're giving them more work because we have a lot of work. So we're sharing this work with our subcontractors. And the third point are the pay negotiations for the 2022. We had a crisis. We came out of the crisis with pay negotiations for the white collars at 4.2% and the others at 5.2% on an average. On an average, because actually there was a uniform increase. We gave 140 euros to everybody. So that's an average increase for the non-white collars to 7%, much more for the small pays. And we can count them on the fingers of one hand. And we are not taking into account the profit sharing and the bonuses. And in 2023, we are right in the middle of our negotiations. Actually, at the end, I propose 6% for the white collars and the others. It doesn't seem to satisfy them that much, so we'll see what's going to happen in the coming weeks and days. So it's 6% of increase in salaries. We increase it by 7% for the non-white collars, to which we add 4 months, plus 4 months of net salary, to which we add 500 euros of bonus that we paid at the end of 2022. And this year, there's no Emirate bonus, but there will be the air show, etc., etc. I don't think you can find anything better in the rest of France. And you, the journalists, have you received a 6% increase? The Figaro is going to scold me, but I'm not working for you, Charles. So you see, when I see some articles that say that this is a scandal, Dassault is increasing its prices only by its pay by 6% only, and with the results, I show you 8.3% operating margin. We're not among the top margins. We're just good. I'm not criticizing, but that's not the top margin. But we're among the top for the increases. That's just to give you some fuel for your articles. Vincent Lamijon challenge. Good morning. Calculation, you have 164 Rafales in your backlog to deliver. If you count the 42 from the French tranche and the 36 from Indonesia, 42 minus 6, we go beyond 240 for 2023. For only 15 Rafales produced during the same period of time. So my question is the following. When will we see the main ramping up? And what is your maximum ramping up that you can reach? Is it 30, a little more? And the question is, what is the limit for the industrial tool at Dassault? Can you go +3 per month? So 2023, it's quite simple. the contracts. There were two parts, the former contracts in 2015, etc., and then the new contracts. Actually, 2023 will be exclusively reserved to France. We will deliver 14 aircraft to France, and we've delivered one to Greece. That will be the only export delivery for once. I'm giving you this detail. And so all the new contracts, the 31 Egyptian ones, the 80 Rafales, I'll tell you more about this later on, and the additional ones to Greece. We'll begin delivering Greece next year, and the 9 new ones, so this will come afterwards. So you are right, it isn't with 15 a year that we will get the right flows, especially if we get the orders. Right now, we still haven't got the orders. So we've anticipated the passage to Phase 3 since a few months. What is important is to warn our supply chain. There were difficulties because of the ramp-ups. We have to program them and tell them, careful, go up to Phase 3. We're going to organize ourselves so that when the orders will have to be delivered and when new orders will arrive, I'm saying might arrive, we're still taking orders at Dassault. We haven't closed our wicket. So we should be able to keep delivering. So we can reach Phase 3, and we can still increase our pace, and then we'll be flat. If you take the years 2027, 2030, you have the UAE, because it's going to be in those years. We're going to see how France will adapt the 42, because as I said earlier on, take orders, that's one thing. Deliver them, that's another thing. Because we have certain authorizations, and then there are the payment credits we have to pay. Because when you deliver an aircraft, you have to pay for it. We're a bit mercantile at Dassault. Pay for them, that means we need to have the budget and not just the military programming law. We need the budgets. So there's the temptation in general to smoothen out this whole of 4 years. For 4 years, it was 3 times less a few years ago. But thank God we had exports. Otherwise, we'd have stopped manufacturing completely. So now it's the other way around, but we haven't reached Phase 3. 27-30, we can still take on new contracts, and we're going to go and look for them. Tara Patel from Bloomberg. Can you comment the perspectives, the new Rafale contracts in the future, Colombia, India, and the others, Indonesia, etc.? Well, I'm not going to do this because I never do this. And I might be mistaken because Colombia, I cannot really bet on Colombia. Last year when we spoke here, I talked about it, so I'd rather be cautious. It came out in the media, this will of the Colombians. So we are negotiating with the Colombians. Will we sign? We'll see. We are engaged. We would like to win a contract in India, 26 Rafale for the Indian Navy. It would be a first contract for the International Navy. We've done this before. I'm not going to tell you where, but it'll be quite interesting. It would be quite logical, too, because we have Rafales with the Indian Air Force, and to have the same aircraft for the Navy, it's quite logical. So we are engaged to have these contracts in India. Indonesia, it's a question of implementation rather than contracts. We have signed the 42 aircraft for Indonesia, plus 36, and there are other prospections. Yes, we do have them. We do have them down. Yes, Mr. Chairman, by accepting to be at the head of the FCAS with the cooperation, is this something, a bet that you cannot keep? Because I see 3 hurdles which are very difficult to overcome. The first is that you'll have to juggle with the Bundestag that keeps changing its mind all the time. And the second point is that you're going to have to satisfy two armies that have at least two armies. The first, which is turned towards the east, quite rightly so, and we are to the west with the whole overseas territories. And the third point, you'll have to cooperate with Airbus Defence that has not built any military aircraft for a long, long time, because Airbus Defence, these are bits and pieces of old companies that have never really manufactured military aircraft, unless I'm mistaken. The only bit coming from France is Dassault Aviation that built the Griffon in 1950. So at the same time, you seem to be very peaceful, at peace. So you have the right weapons to defend yourself. I think it's the Rafale. Tell me if it is right or wrong. And another totally different question. You talked about the exceptional annual pay negotiations at Dassault, but is it really related with the exceptional results, financial results that you've presented? I'll go straight to the second question. The second one, the exceptionally exceptional results. No, it's not exceptional. These results are not exceptional. For Dassault, it's good, 1% better than last year. That's not exceptional. The number of orders is exceptional. Yes, I agree with you, and I said so. But the result, 8% operating margin, if I look at my peers, I'm under. I don't want to say it in front of our shareholder representative. But if you take the large electronicians, look at Thales yesterday, they were at 11% operating margin. If you look at the American companies, it's much more. If you look at Airbus, so where are the operating results? These are normal results. And these normal results, when you look at the net, thanks to the contribution of Thales and our own results, well, I share it 50-50 between the employees, etc. So the annual pace, it's got nothing to do with profit sharing. That's very good. And if the annual pace have got nothing to do with profit sharing, it's legal. So if I got rid of that and if I went back to the legal, what would the employees say? They wouldn't be happy because they only get 3 to 4 months. So when they're good results, they get bonuses. And if we were negative, it's already happened in the history of Dassault. If there are negative results, they won't get any profit sharing, but we don't reduce their salaries unless we have to lay out, which happened once at the beginning of the 1990s. So honestly, I think that all this is reasonable, and then there are negotiations. We'll see where we reach, and I'm not against. I do understand that there is inflation, there's all that, so I'm not blocking things. I'm not saying what to do like the others, and I will only increase their salaries by 4 or 5%. Who is doing 6% increase? Very few people. So I think that we're reasonable, and everybody should be reasonable. And then I hope that we'll find an agreement, because otherwise I have to increase my prices. If I increase my prices for the Falcons, I have to face the international competition. And so, you see, you have to maintain a balance. As for your first question, why am I at peace? I'm at peace because we've obtained what we wanted to obtain at Dassault Aviation in this 1B phase that prefigures the phase 2, and we want to make our demonstrator fly. We have the levers. We will cooperate with our partners so long as they play the game too, so that we are leaders, so that we might have a flying demonstrator at the end of from the end of 2029 that will help us make the future choices. The real challenge, and I do agree with you, this is a political challenge. I'm not going to negotiate with the Bundestag. I negotiate with the person who will sign the contract with me, our armies and the French Defense Directorate. If they ask me to do something that I cannot do or that I do not want to do for legitimate reasons that I've already explained, we will not sign the contracts because it is our DNA. We sign the contracts only if we know how to fulfill them. Of course, there are always risks with the right prices, with the right schedules, with the right technical definitions. So if it is cooperation, with the right parameters, with the right cooperation rules so that our armies might have the right project, etc. We're not the leaders of the FCAS, but we're the leaders for the NGF. So there are other parameters, other pillars, and other companies are in charge, like Airbus. So there are no leaders for the FCAS. There are pillars, and we are in the technological phase. What I find interesting for my company and for my French partner in particular is that we're going to fly a demonstrator, and that is very important for the teams who've worked on the Rafale, on the Neuron, and who are making this demonstrator fly. And then we'll see what will happen in the future. But those who've negotiated with the Bundestag, it's not going to be easy for them. We have to find the engagements so that we can do away with politics when we have cooperation. It's complicated, but we will not replace politics.
Sorry for taking up the microphone again. I'd like to come back to what you've said about the phase 1B. You've talked about Schumacher and transmission. This is something that appealed to me. I started at Schumacher. I started at Dassault in 1975, but when I read this news about the phase 1B contract with this war to know who is the leader, at that time, I remember going through something terrible. Mr. Marcel Dassault came back to the plant and asked people to start the work again. For 3 weeks, there was a downtime in production. We had the F1 market at that time, and it was replaced by YF16. It was supposed to be the biggest contract for Dassault at that time. So how are you protecting yourself? Since we're the leader, more or less, for the NGF, how do you protect our know-how, the patents, etc.? I think it is essential. Now, regarding the drones, I'm not far from a base where the naval group is going to start military drones with 140 million euros allocated to this. So drones are very important in avionics. I would like to know your point of view about that. No, intellectual property protection and our patents is something we pay particular attention because few companies have accumulated such a know-how in jet fighters. Even in the United States, sometimes it's Lockheed or Boeing or another operator, because there are several players on the market. So for us, it's the same engineering studies, the same manufacturing since the end of the Second World War. So we are paying great attention to it. So we're not going to give away free of charge our know-how, for sure. It will do that only if it is a win-win, that is for us and for the program. So no bargains. And it's not because we're protecting our intellectual property rights that we do not cooperate. There are some arrangements to share intellectual property. The technology will belong to the two partners. It's not because we have a screw of 5 that I will have to give away 50 years of experience to the other partners. Generally speaking, industrial partners fully understand this because they also protect their intellectual property rights. Let's consider my friends and partners at Airbus. They also protect their know-how and their patents. If they want to cooperate, everything is put on the table. Policymakers do not always understand this because they do not consider the very long-term life of a company that has grown based on its know-how and intellectual property. And this is what I explain to those people. Since we have gone through all the items of our agenda, I'd like to thank you for your attention and have a nice day. Thank you.